Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur. Back here again, this is Matt, and welcoming back a very special guest here, Mitch Lovell of the Video Vacuum. Welcome back, Mitch.
Thank you.
Yeah, funniest thing, when I emailed you to see if you wanted to come back on the podcast, like literally in that short period of time between when I emailed you to see if you wanted to come on and you emailed back and said you were up for it, somebody on Twitter actually said, "Hey, are you gonna have Mitch on in the near future?" And so I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna say anything yet because I figured I'd see you, and then we go from there."
Supply and demand.
Exactly, it worked out perfect. And I have to say, because whenever I invite someone to come on the podcast, I always give a couple of possible topics, and I was really excited that you chose this topic for us to discuss today. So I'm really glad that this was the one that you wanted to do.
Well, yeah, I mean it's a seasonal aspect of it that was appealed to me, and also the film itself is I hesitate to call movies now so bad they're good. I just call them a Mitch movie. If it's something that I would watch, I just call it a Mitch movie and put it in my queue. And this kind of checked all the boxes.
All right, excellent. Yeah, for a second, it's interesting. When I first saw it on IMDb, I almost thought it had like kind of a Laugh Olympics quality to it. It was like Hanna-Barbera, like all the characters that come out. But I realized there aren't as many people in this as I initially thought. But still, there are plenty. There's enough for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like if the Expendables of the Expendables went on a holiday adventure and forgot to actually kickbox people.
Right. Right. Exactly. So just to give people an idea, we're talking about Santa's Summer House here, which is a film from 2012, directed by David DeCoteau, which people probably know now as the guy who does all those The Wrong movies on Lifetime. But he got his start with kind of more racier fare in the 1990s. He's almost like the Eric Roberts of directors, I think, in terms of his output and how many films he gets out in a year.
That's a very good call because, I mean, he seems like a guy who doesn't say no very much.
Right.
And, my unofficial motto at the Video Vacuum's always been quantity over quality. And he like I say, he checks that box with spades. So.
Yeah. And I think when you watch enough of these, you almost get to appreciate the way that guys like him or, the directors like him ply their craft to make these kind of movies.
Well, I mean, they talk about auteur theory being a myth, and then you see something like D.B. Cooper versus Bigfoot, and you're like, okay, well, DeCoteau is very much an auteur because only one person in this whole world could probably have made that movie, and that's him.
Right. Exactly. Now, the film that we're talking about here, Santa's Summer House, it stars, I guess we could say 4 DTV stars. I mean, the 2 biggest ones, I think, are Gary Daniels and Cynthia Rothrock. Those are kind of your top notch. And then we've got Daniel Bernhardt and then Kathy Long, who Yeah, I know she was in Knights. That's the only thing I could think of was that the Albert Pyun film Knights, which also had Gary Daniels in it as well.
Yeah, she had done, I think, a lot of stunt work as well, but she definitely had, enough credentials to kind of hang with the four of those. And we can't forget Chris Mitchum, who goes back a little bit further. Not quite in that same school, but definitely of that same ilk of just like somebody that would just grind out these B movies, would really kind of, I wouldn't say he had, those guys have, low standards. I think they just like the work. And, for them, it must have been a good opportunity to get together and make a movie when they're not kickboxing somebody for 90 minutes. They can just kind of chill, not worry about fight choreography, and just kind of more or less be themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the kind of funny things about Chris Mitchum is now seeing him older. He looks like a cross between his dad, Robert Mitchum, and Rutger Hauer.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, so just to give a basic plot synopsis of this. So our characters are in a kind of a van headed to a resort somewhere in what we think is somewhere between, I guess it's kind of closer to Northern California. And the van driver somehow ends up in a fog and he gets lost. So he goes to this beautiful mansion with a nice view and everything. And they are welcomed by none other than Cynthia Rothrock, who plays a woman named Nana. And she comes out with some really nice cookies and tells the crew that, hey, you're lost. You can't make it to your resort. If you'd like, you can stay with us for a little bit. And turned out that resort was double booked. So they stay at the resort, only to find out that Cynthia Rothrock's husband in the movie, played by Christopher Mitchum, playing a character named Pop, who we think might have some ulterior motives. We discover that he's actually Santa, and he has brought each of these people here because he wants to sort of, I guess, give them Christmas wishes that they never quite got. They're a little bit more, they're not necessarily a certain toy or some kind of item of some sort. It's more of like a Christmas wish that's a little bit beyond that. And so he tries to give them each their wishes. Of course, they're a little bit skeptical until, he's able to prove that he's Santa. And then, they all are much happier at the end there.
Yeah, it's definitely the cliched, workaholic father spending more time with his kids kind of scenario. The kind of squabbling sisters putting their feud aside for the holiday. And then, well, Daniel Bernhardt's, I think, problem was just not to be such a creep all the time. I didn't quite catch what his magical wish was, but
right. Yeah, I guess we find out at some point that he's really jaded because I guess because his parents divorced and he was like kind of, I guess he like would escape into sci-fi-ism. But yeah, I think the Daniel Bernhardt character is kind of an old adage that I've noticed with movies. It's like, we always say that really good, people that are like really nice play really great baddies, but playing a heel or a jerk, just kind of like a jerk as opposed to an actual baddie is a little bit more difficult, I think, for people.
And he plays a rocket scientist.
Right.
And I believe him in the Bloodsport movies where he's taken over for Van Damme, and I believe him in Future War where he's like a kickboxer from the future, but as a rocket scientist. Yeah, that was kind of the first sign that we're going to be in trouble at this point.
Yeah. And what's great is he doesn't do anything rocket science-y at all throughout the film.
Well, he makes that half-assed drone out of duct tape and toothpicks or something at the end, and I guess that's supposed to be him getting back into his childhood enthusiasm or whatever. But yeah, it was a little bit off the mark in terms of what he could portray believably, I think.
Right, exactly. Now, Mitch, what were your thoughts overall on this movie?
Well, I'm going to start with the positive because 'tis the season.
Right.
I don't want to put coal in everybody's stocking just yet, but like I said, like I think all these guys, like I said, they're especially like Rothrock and Daniels. I think beyond like being in movies, they do a lot of traveling on the circuit of the martial arts circuits, doing demonstrations, and going to conventions. And I think that community is pretty tight knit. And I think all these guys kind of see each other in circumstances where they have to, get in a gi, fight, train, choreography. And like I said, I think this, it's a vacation movie. I think it was a little bit of a vacation for them because it looks like, the van that picked them up from the hotel and they just like filmed that, them arriving on set. So, I think they were, except for Bernhardt, who, was laughable. I don't think anybody phoned it in. I think actually Rothrock was pretty well cast as Mrs. Claus because she always has that bubbly, enthusiastic demeanor to her. So I think that was good. And Chris Mitchum, I believed he was Santa Claus without the beard, the ho-ho-hos. And I never thought I would say that, but, it was pretty good casting for what, the obvious budget was. But now that I got that out of the way, this was a tough sit.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing. I think the roughest part for me, and I don't know how you feel about this, but there's a scene where they're playing croquet, and you're literally seeing the same scenes over and over again. And there's a sense there that like maybe something happened where they made this movie, and maybe they had to make it for TV, and somebody said to DeCoteau something along the lines of like, listen, we need about 10 more minutes or something like that. And he's like, where am I going to get 10 more minutes? These people have probably all flown off to their their other places or whatever. And so we're just like, okay, let me just keep adding in more croquet footage. And that one really hurt because I'm just like, okay, end scene, and then it just wasn't ending.
On Mystery Science Theater, they talk about rock climbing on Lost Continent. They talk about the sandstorm scene in Hercules against the Moon Men. The croquet game is right up there with those two cinematic, just like grinding to a halt the whole movie. And you're just, in most of these, most movies, even, sports movies, yeah, but not, any movie that has a sports scene is usually edited. There's a montage. There's at least, a semblance of what's going on. This was like somebody's home movie of somebody else's family playing croquet. And there's no really kind of, you're just kind of thrown into it. And like the sappy music is going, like blaring in the background. And there's like all these near misses, and we're they hit the wrong ball or they accidentally hit the guy's foot, and it's all, and you're just like, what am I watching? Like, this is, even if they had like Howard Cosell or somebody doing play-by-play, you still couldn't make any sense out of what was going on. It's like 10 minutes nonstop.
Yeah, and I think, rock climbing is a really great analogy for this because the thing about rock climbing that made it so bad in Lost Continent is that you never knew where they were in relation to anything else. And that's the same thing with this game is that none of it really, you didn't know who was winning, who was losing, like what the shots meant, what the purpose was. It was just like, let's shoot, let's laugh, and then, recycle. And when you're seeing the same scene again, too, you're like, okay, he just did this 2 minutes ago. Now you're showing him how to do this shot again. How does it work? And it felt like, boy, like somebody must have said like your movie can't be that short, which that's one thing I think with some of these directors who don't do made for TV as much, or they aren't used to, you could put out a 76-minute movie and it wouldn't be a problem, but for TV you can't do that.
Right, and DeCoteau definitely comes from that school, full moon movies, Empire movies, where 76 minutes is, you're still pushing your luck on some of those movies.
Right.
And this, without any kickboxing, without any, kind of action element, like that was the action sequence, and it's probably the lowest of all their careers of just. And bless their heart, they're only as good as what they're given.
Right.
A lot of those guys, if you've seen any of their movies, if they're paired with a good co-star or they're paired with the right director, a sturdy script, they can do pretty well. But they're not the kind of guys that can take a lousy script and make it better. And when that scene definitely had no script, so.
Right. Right. And one thing I did notice, I don't know if you caught this as well, but every once in a while when Rothrock would jump and her dress would go up a bit, you could see the brace that she had on her leg, which I think was maybe a little bit telling about what you were saying about how the stars in this movie were probably happy to not have to do any choreographed fight scenes. Like you got to see the toll that it's taken on their careers to do some of these movies, especially Rothrock, who did a lot in Hong Kong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I didn't catch the brace, but I know that, lately here, I mean, even Bernhardt's been, and Daniels, they're making movies at a clip that, is probably even more than their heyday.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of them are smaller roles now, but, I can't imagine this movie being any more than 5 to 7 days long in terms of shooting.
Yeah.
So for them to say, "Hey, look, you're going to have a week-long stay at a nice little summer resort, beachside," they're like, "Yeah, I'll cash that check."
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of them, I'm pretty sure Rothrock is based in LA, and I have a feeling a lot of them are based there. So the fact that DeCoteau and the production are coming in and saying, we're shooting this at a mansion in Malibu as opposed to like you've got to go to Canada or you've got to go to Thailand, I imagine that probably helps as well. I mean, they might even be able to go home after shooting during the day.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of is a testament to DeCoteau's, just ability to churn these things out. I mean, because he uses the same house in so many of those movies, because you have to wonder, because, they make a lot of business about the house being Santa's summer home and, it's the off season. I was like, is he renting that out to like the frat boys from the 1313 series, when he's up north, or,
Right.
or is the talking cat living there when he's not there?
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, that was one thing I was wondering because, the first one of these that I watched that had, one of these auteur directors was my wife and I watched, I think it was called Christmas in Palm Springs with Fred Olen Ray. And you could kind of see some of the touches that that they would put in there, or some of their old style, and it got me thinking. I was like, boy, it makes a lot of sense to get someone like a DeCoteau or a Fred Olen Ray to do these kind of movies because you don't have to go to Canada. They know how to get it under budget locally in LA or something like that. But also, they're used to spitting things out in short order, and I imagine it's probably easier to get people, not huge names, but names enough to get them on board if they're only going to be shooting for a short period of time.
And guys like Ray and Jim Wynorski, they already have their kind of stable B-movie actors that they can call at the moment's notice and get in there. And what's kind of, like going back to what you said about their ability to churn these out. I always see like Wynorski and Ray, DeCoteau, even like, guys like Tibor Takas, who went from making The Gate to sci-fi movies to these Christmas movies. They're almost like carpetbaggers in a sense that wherever there's a need in the market, they exploit it. And early days was the direct-to-video market, so they're making B horror movies, and then in the 90s it's the cable market, so they're making these erotic thrillers or Skinemax movies. And then now, there's everything's content now. It's not really, film or movies anymore. It's just content. And these guys, there's a hole in the Hallmark knockoff market, and these guys can come in and they can knock these things out, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point because my wife and I were looking to kind of load up our queue with some of these holiday movies because we just get a kick out of watching them, and she wanted some more from like the 2000s period, the first decade of the 2000s, as opposed to more recent ones. And when you go to Hallmark, you really, if you go through the guide, the cable guide or whatever, you really can't find anything more recent than like 2016, and a lot of them have like 2019 or 2020 for the dates on them. So I think it's also a matter of like they want to make sure they're pumping out new movies and having new content because they flood the market with so many Christmas movies. I mean, I think Hallmark does only Christmas movies from like November on or something like that. And so it's like, yeah, this market, this piece opened up in the market, and it was, I always thought it was really cool that these guys that, you know, that we're used to seeing in the 90s doing a completely different kind of movie were filling the void for them.
Yeah, and I think it's probably nostalgia, but I mean, because let's face it, there's only one Sorority Babes in the Slime Ball Bowl-orama. There will never. That's a one of a kind movie, and to expect Dakota to come out of the gate every time with a movie like that, it's not going to happen. But I think there's that nostalgic part of me. It's like, why can't you just do like rubbery monster movies and girls in hot tubs and stuff like that, and then. But what you see is like, I think he's really in his element when he's doing like the 1313 movies, and and that's a market that's really not being tapped either, is the gay themed horror movie. I mean, that's the horror community is filled with gay viewers that want to see they wanted to see something kind of geared towards them, and it's kind of refreshing because even as someone just a regular viewer, it lures you in because if you're familiar with Dakota's shooting style, it's like this this whole world, because you're used to, like, in the 80s it was like Linnea Quigley. Yeah. Michelle Bauer, Brink Stevens, they're the ones in the shower. Now it's like these like chiseled, football player kind of guys, and it's an interesting way to flip the script, I think, to kind of make it accessible to everybody, really.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think about DeCoteau that it seems like, from what I've been able to gather from him, I mean, his picture on IMDb, his profile picture is his no hate picture. So I get the sense, and I mean, one of the things he's done really well, I think, is he's really pushed Vivica A. Fox in those, especially in those Wrong movies. And I mean, she and the two of them have really great chemistry. She seems to really do well in his movies. And so, yeah, I get the sense that, yeah, especially with him, he's someone that's like, yeah, if you tell him, oh, we want to make a gay-themed horror movie, he's all for it. He's going to, want to, get as much out there for as many people and have as many voices as he can.
And it's like, going back to the whole thing, like, he won't make one, he'll make like 12 in like the span of 2 or 3 years. And even like the family-friendly movies, like A Talking Cat. Well, you can't just have a talking cat. You got to have a talking pony. And then there's like the Easter Bunny dog movie that he made. And then there's a Halloween dog movie. And it's just kind of like, most guys would probably spend 2 weeks to make one of those movies. And he takes 2 weeks and makes 2 of those movies. And there you go. They're on, I can't say video store shelves, but they're a thumbnail on your television now. And, the kids have to watch something too, and I think it's funny to see, like, my daughter was watching the Doggone Christmas that Jim Wynorski did, and I'm just like biting my lip. I'm like, wow, you're watching this while I'm in the other room watching Not of This Earth. So it was kind of like one of those moments where you're like, oh, well, wait till you get older, you can see some of the other movies he's done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I try to do now because, again, my wife and I like some of these Christmas movies, and I like to try to find the ones that the guys like Wynorski, Fred Olen Ray, and DeCoteau have done, because sometimes you see little touches of their style. I know watching the Christmas in Palm Springs one, my wife was noticing, because part of the story with that one is that it's got Michelle Trachtenberg from Buffy the Vampire Slayer in it, and then your standard fare of supporting cast people like Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, but she is interested in this guy who has an orphanage. Of course, what else would he have? He'd be working at an orphanage, and so one of the kids looked very much like something you'd see out of a 1950s a Christmas movie. I mean, the way his hair was, I think even his outfit, I think he even had overalls on or something like that. And so my wife remarked on him, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a touch that Fred Olen Ray would put in a movie like this, is he would want to bring something from his, his movie watching past when he was growing up, which I always love seeing that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, even when you're watching something like one of his many bikini movies,
Right.
or or going back to even like his like the action movies that he did with like Ross Hagen and David Carradine. There's a cutting style, there's a shooting style, and you can't really disguise that. That's just how they make the movie. They say style is failed technique, and like any movie of Fred Olen Ray's, you're watching a Fred Olen Ray just from just the way it's framed. And I mean, I've seen countless of them. So it's he's one of those guys, quantity over quality, and I'll watch anything he made. Winorski, DeCoteau, I'm, you know, I have no qualms about sitting through any of their films.
Yeah, same here. And I think it's one of those things I think that has made it kind of cool or more interesting in recent years, because the Christmas movie used to be the Lifetime or Hallmark Christmas movie. It used to be get some B movie actor or BTV actor that we haven't seen in a long time, ship them up to Canada, add in a chiseled Canadian actor to be the lead, the co-lead or whatever, and go from there. And now with these guys down here, they can shoot in LA on a budget that you don't need to be in Canada necessarily to shoot those movies. And so it's added a new element to these films that I really like. But then, like you said, we're used to watching their B movie stuff from the 90s and how that's shot. And it is always kind of funny to see those angles and all of that. Those camera angles and whatnot, and see it being done with like a Christmas Romance or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean these guys, they're that's what exploitation filmmakers do.
Yeah.
They grind them out. They find a niche that needs to be exploited, and they do that. And again, I'm always wistful for their '80s stuff, even like their the stuff that Ray and Winorski was doing 10 years ago with the Busty Cops movies and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I appreciate the fact that they're still out there making a movie. It might not be something that I would watch, but like around Christmas, yeah, okay, I'll watch a Fred Olen Ray Christmas movie or a David DeCoteau movie for the Christmas audience. I'll definitely do that.
Yeah. It's always it's a really it's an interesting niche with these directors, and I think it just was one of those things where it never crossed my mind that, of course, if I were these studios that need like Hallmark or whatever, and I needed to pump these out, it just makes absolute sense that if they're willing to keep the talent or like the actors with their clothes on, or keep everybody well clothed, that yeah, let's do it. Let's have them make the movies.
And I mean, it is the law of diminishing returns.
Right.
You get a Lifetime movie with somebody that's made some Quantum Leap episodes or something in the '90s that they can churn them out in 14 days. Well, we need them quicker than that. We need a guy that was in the B movie trenches in the '80s that can churn them out in 5 days. And it's like you can see, because even the Santa's Summer House, I mean it almost, I've seen better cinematography in a porn.
Right.
It's like high def haze to it, and it's just. But you know what? It's content. It's out there. We watched it. So I give I try not to punch down, especially when guys are out there in the trenches making these movies like that. But it's definitely, you're not gonna Hallmark Channel, I can't see showing that unless they were desperate, but it would definitely be like on your Vizio television or on Prime where I saw it. So it's it's out there, it's out in the world, we're discussing it, so it's something.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that's funny about this one, you mentioned it being on Prime, is that this movie comes up on Prime if you're searching holiday films, but it also comes up on Prime if you're like, oh, what Gary Daniels films do they have on here, or what Cynthia Rothrock movies do they have on here? And so then, I think there is that curiosity factor if you're an action fan, like, what's going on here? I've seen
Hmm.
however many of Rothrock's films. What is she doing in this? I got to see this, and so it has a sort of an added benefit by having all those stars in it.
There is that curiosity factor, but halfway through, like, after the croquet scene and after the just the gratuitous family strife and everything, and halfway through, when they're trying to get their wishes, I was kind of remaking the movie in my head, like, okay, what if we had the same cast, the same premise, like, but terrorists took over Santa's summer house
Right.
or ninjas or something. It just, there was at a point, like I said, I appreciate the fact that these guys can make this movie without punching somebody for 90 minutes. But if ever a movie needed some ninjas or terrorists, it was this one because, but again, I respect the the fact that it's a family film. Kids of all ages will probably, can't say they'll enjoy it, but they might be forced to watch it at some point. But yeah, I like I said, I just started resorting to remaking it in my head. I'm like, wow, Gary Daniels doesn't roundhouse somebody. I might have to take a break on this one.
Yeah. Well, tell me too. Did you notice? This was maybe something that just I noticed, but like Rothrock did a good job of not walking around like she's someone who could kick somebody in the face at a moment's notice. But it felt like the way that Bernhardt and Daniels walked around, the way they had like their arms kind of at their side, and the way that they kind of moved. There was a sense that they could they were ready to roundhouse somebody. Like they can't turn that part of them off, I guess, of the just being ready to get into a fighting stance at a moment's notice.
Well, especially Bernhardt, because I mean, his character is more of like the obnoxious braggart kind of guy.
Right.
Yeah, I can see him. But there was a like I think it's a good like 10-15 minutes before Daniels even takes his sunglasses off. Like it kind of added to the whole fact, like, did they just film him arriving from the hotel and just put it in the movie, because he doesn't seem to kind of switch on into a character until about 20 minutes in, because I mean, a lot of that's he just standing around listening to exposition about the house and Nana and all that stuff. But yeah, it seemed like Bernhardt really was kind of itching to kind of do a split or something.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he gets that one moment where he's in the hot tub, so it's the only time he really gets to take his shirt off at all. But beyond that, like, yeah, he could not, like, he was supposed to be some kind of rocket scientist character, but he could not turn off like the European like jet setter kind of thing. Like, he's wearing these like nicely, I would say almost tailored polos and linen pants. Like, he just couldn't not be vacationing in Monaco, as the guy from Switzerland at all in that film. And so then it's like, he tries to be like this nerdy rocket scientist, which I'm not saying rocket scientists have to be nerdy, that they can't be these Europeans who vacation well in Monaco and, look like they would be on the cover of GQ magazine or in a GQ cover story or something like that. But yeah, it was like impossible for him to not to turn that part of him off. It was like, for me, I was like almost like, man, I would love to be vacationing with Bernhardt. It seems like he lives it up. Like, he's got like the best of everything. And it was not, he didn't seem, he was trying to be a jerk the whole time, but instead it was more like, like, I don't know, like, yeah, like, like a Bond villain or something like that.
Yeah, seriously. I think if they upped it a little bit more, he could have been like a Elon Musk kind of,
Right.
kind of like billionaire kind of guy with the right backstory or whatever. But they just opted for the traditional kind of route with that.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder with a script like this, you wonder if this wasn't written with the idea in mind that it was going to be for action stars in it. And then, of course, I think, DeCoteau rounds out the cast with people he knew, like Jessica Morris, who plays Constance in there,
Hmm.
the older sister. She's a definite mainstay. She's done I don't know how many DeCoteau films. And I think Robert Mitchum. I'm sorry, not Robert Mitchum. I getting my Mitchums mixed up here. Christopher Mitchum. He, I think, has also done his share of DeCoteau films. So it's he rounded up the cast with people that he knew could do these movies, but I wonder if this was meant to be like a more standard film, and it wasn't meant to have action stars in it.
I mean, it's quite possible. Like I said, like those actors, they all kind of also, in addition to being in the movies, they also kind of do like martial arts demonstrations, conventions and stuff. And I have to wonder if they were, if they found out they were all going to be kind of in the same area at the same time, to just get them into this Christmas movie. And like I said, I can't fault them for wanting to at least stretch their acting muscles a little bit. And I'm sure the money wasn't much, but I'm sure it looked like it was fairly easy money. So especially some of those guys have like hundreds of movies on their IMDb listing. So when you're cruising by, it would be easy to miss that one. But then again, like I'm just trying to figure out who would be in the movie, knowing that Dakota's usual stable. I could see like maybe Eric Roberts as Santa. I mean, I would pay to see that.
Yeah, what if he'd be in the movie too much as Santa, right? Like Christopher Mitchum was in the movie too much for it to be an Eric Roberts role. I think it's like it was.
That's true too.
Yeah, but I know what you mean there, because I mean, actually, what's interesting is Gary Daniels ended up doing another DeCoteau film, The Wrong Child, which of course had Vivica A. Fox, who's done her share of those, and that was another one where he didn't wasn't a kickboxer in any way, and that's kind of a funny one because spoiler alert, the wrong child, the kid that they that bring in or whatever, he kills Daniels, and you're just like, you're seeing him kill Daniels in a way that, like, in however many movies Daniels easily disarmed somebody who attacked him that way and just like knocked them out with one blow. And so I think from Daniel's standpoint, I think one of the problems with him is that, and maybe Rothrock, you could say the same thing in Bernhardt as well, that because so many bigger names have fallen into the DTV realm, I think they got squeezed out a little bit, especially like in the late 2000s into the early 2010s. And I wonder if there was this mindset of, we need to show that we can do other things so that perhaps we get more offers and it's not just action movies, that maybe there's something else there for us.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I mean, another thing is, when Daniels was in The Expendables, not very much, albeit, but that still kind of bumped his name up a little bit. You saw him; he got a nice boost from that, and I think that was kind of around the same time where on a back of a DVD or even on the little synopsis on your television, it says The Expendables, Gary Daniels, or whatever. So Bernhardt starred in I think he was in one of the Bourne movies, or he's had like roles as like the henchman or the bodyguard who gets like punched whenever somebody enters the room or whatever. So they could slap one of those top-notch Hollywood credits to his name, and you think you're getting this kind of bigger name cast than you really are. Which to us, I mean, we watched it because it has those guys in it. Right. But like I think to the average viewer, somebody, they're hoping maybe somebody will think Gary Daniels is actually another of the Expendables that they could recognize.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really great point. I don't know how the algorithms work, but I mean, it's possible too that even watching something like The Expendables or something like that this might get picked up in the algorithms then, and it may perpetuate it that way in streaming services. I don't know if in 2012 if they were thinking so much like that, because Netflix's streaming was just starting to take off and Prime streaming was just starting to take off at that time. But by the same token, I think. I think 2012, I don't know if the video store was still quite at the level that I think it was really starting to fade at that point, and it really had moved to like Redbox and streaming and those kinds of things. But I think, just seeing those names on the cover, I think for somebody who was a fan of action, probably saw those names and thought, hey, let's give it a try and see what this is. But I agree with you that I think maybe some ninjas coming in to maybe create like, I mean that mansion would be great for a Die Hard scenario as well. I mean, I don't know what kind of damage they can do to it. I don't know how they can mitigate that if they blow anything up or something like that. But it was pretty ripe for a nice Die Hard scenario as well.
Yeah, that half car sofa, easily somebody could use as a shield. The pool, they could electrocute somebody in that. Ninjas jumping, rappelling down the wall of the columns. Definitely a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah. Now this brings up another topic. I'm thinking about the idea of it because I think one of the problems with possibly making it into a hostage situation, I guess you would have to eliminate the fact that Chris Mitchum is Santa, because based on the powers that Santa is given in this film, the fact that he can change the weather. Obviously, he's omnipresent. He can be in many places at the same time. He's pretty much omnipotent. It's almost like if you were going to make a Marvel movie, Santa would be quite a villain that the heroes would have to try to defeat. So in that case, that it would be very easy, even if there were ninjas with special ninja abilities. With Santa's abilities in this film, it seems like he could snap his fingers and they would just disappear.
Well, unless they were elf ninjas that knew all of Santa's tricks and played the Santa playbook, and I think we could work around that. I think I think what one scenario is, of course, he could get stuck in the chimney.
Yes.
Like Die Hard, he could be crawling through the chimney and get stuck, and then needs all the B movie stars to come save him.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting scenario, because I used to watch a cartoon with my nephew called The Regular Show. I don't know if you're familiar with that one on I think it was on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, I think.
Cartoon Network, yeah. I'm familiar with it. I haven't seen too many episodes, but yeah.
So they did a Christmas episode where there was an elf that went rogue, and he stole this, like, I guess there's the way that Santa gave presents was he had a box that could give people whatever they wanted, and this rogue elf stole the box, and so Santa calls on the crew from The Regular Show to go and get that. I mean, imagine a scenario like that where, like, Chris Mitchum is Santa, and he's like, yeah, maybe Eric Roberts is the rogue elf. I mean, somebody like that, and it's like he calls in this crew of action stars, and just, they all have like different backgrounds in like special forces and things like that. And he's like, all right, listen, I need you guys to get this thing back, whatever it is that, that my rogue elf took from the North Pole. I can't do it myself for whatever reason, maybe because Santa magic doesn't work on the elves or something like that. I'm sure you can come up with any kind of rule to make it so that they have to get it. And I mean, the only problem is, of course, in that point, it's no longer a Die Hard scenario. So maybe Santa is in a room of the mansion that they never use anywhere else in the film. So it's like they go in to meet Santa in this room, whatever it is. They design it to look like a boardroom or something like that. And then we see our characters sort of climbing the wall of the mansion in the middle of the night in, like, the kind of the black special ops gear. And so you could still have the film just take place in the mansion, because I think that's probably a problem, right? We can't use a different set for this.
Yeah, I mean, it would be too expensive to have fake snow in a David DeCoteau movie. But I think we're getting warmer here. I think basically it would be kind of like a Dirty Dozen scenario where he gets all the guys from the naughty list, right. And it's like, if you want presents this year, you're gonna go and kill my elf. And I got the title, The Expendables.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's perfect. That would be amazing.
There we go.
I love the idea of the naughty list too. Like, kind of like, they do the whole thing, like in the Dirty Dozen, where the person like runs down all the horrible things they've done. So, like, maybe this is where Jessica Morris, who's the DeCoteau mainstay, maybe that's her job, as she's like Santa's, right-hand person, and she's running down the list, while they're sitting there
and
on this
checking
table.
It twice.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And it's like they each have their special character names, and it's like, okay, they go to Daniel Bernhardt's character. Yeah, you blew up this thing, and you did this and that this year, and you killed this many people. He's like, yeah, I guess I did, Santa, or something like that. And it's like kind of they each get their rap sheets or something like that.
I think this could work. I mean, I'd watch it.
Yeah, I think this would be fantastic. I mean, that's one of the funny things is that there's always that debate, right, about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. And I think the big reason why people try to poo-poo it as a Die Hard movie, they say it's because, well, it just takes place at Christmas, but it doesn't have anything else Christmas in it, which isn't true, right? If there's like a Christmas party, there's this idea of that time of year just before Christmas where, I mean, it was kind of like a play on consumerism as well, and the way Christmas is celebrated, or was celebrated, in the 80s, but also, kind of the same way now. But I think the reason why people don't want to call it a Christmas movie is because it's got, action and killing and all that kind of stuff in it. And so I feel like that kind of a genre, kind of spinning off of Die Hard, of like Christmas action movies, I think would be fantastic.
Well, I mean, my argument for it being a Christmas movie is it brings the family together. I mean, every Christmas movie, the family is always apart, or too busy working, or there's a divorce, or there's something that keeps the family from being a complete family unit. And we have that in the beginning. They're fighting, and at the end, they embrace, and the Christmas music plays triumphantly at the end. I mean, it is a Christmas movie. It's he might not be Scrooge, but he learns, through the terrorist plot that to be a better husband, to be a better it's a Christmas movie. I don't see where there's a gray area there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I'm someone who's kind of more like, I accept more possibilities for I'm more likely to say, yeah, I see where you're coming from on a Christmas movie, than to be like, no, that's not a Christmas movie. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that take on it, that fact that, because that's like ultimately what these Christmas movies do, right? I mean, even Santa's Summer House, you've got, the family where you've got, Gary Daniels and his wife is played by Kathy Long, and then the son is a new actor who, hadn't been in anything before this, according to the film at least. And the son is upset because the parents are working too much, and it's kind of like they're thinking of it's a working vacation, but also the couple themselves do not really have the spark anymore. I mean, that's the whole croquet game. The whole point of the croquet game is to show us that Gary Daniels is not a good husband, because his one thing I forgot to mention is everybody has to get a secret Santa gift for somebody else. Chris Mitchum as Santa sets it up so the whole cast, everybody gives themselves everybody draws a name and has to get a secret Santa gift for somebody. And so Gary Daniels draws his wife for the secret Santa, and he throws the croquet match, and that's supposed to be his gift for her, because the bet was if the guys won the croquet match, whoever won the croquet match, the other one had to do the dishes. So essentially he was saying you didn't have to do the dishes. And so, yeah, it's almost kind of the same thing as Die Hard. I mean, in Die Hard, they were divorced, right? I think the couple, he was like she had moved out to LA, and he was still a cop in New York, and he was
right.
Yeah. And so, this kind of the same thing here, where it's like this family, in Santa's Summer House, and other people too kind of learn the magic of Christmas. But you're right. It's the same idea with Die Hard. They just go about it in a completely different way that I think for some people, they don't want to, they have this idea of what a Christmas movie is supposed to be. And they when they see something that goes about it differently, it hurts their sensibilities, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean, you don't. It doesn't have to be Santa in disguise bringing the people together. It doesn't have to be a ghost of Christmas past to show you the area of the ways. It's about how the holidays can be hell for a lot of people, and it's at the end it's reaffirming. You go through some stuff at the holidays, and then somehow together you kind of make it through. And you can even say the same for Lethal Weapon, but with Riggs. If you take Riggs and Murtaugh as like kind of like a a couple,
Right.
not necessarily romantic couple, but like they're opposites attract.
Yeah.
They don't it's just like the whole Daniel Bernhardt scenario here with the girl, and like they don't like each other, but they grow to respect one another at the end, and finally they're together at the end. So and then there's Reindeer Games, which is just that's a Christmas movie, and I won't hear no tell of it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Reindeer Games usually gets lost in the conversation, but I watch Reindeer Games every year religiously, and it's a pretty good religion.
Yeah, so it's funny because one of my coworkers brought up the Lethal Weapon one. He said, why is it that people consider Die Hard a Christmas movie, but they don't consider Lethal Weapon? And again, I'm someone, they always joke about like, are you a small hall or big hall person for like the Hall of Fames? And I'm still a small hall person when it comes to sports Hall of Fames. I don't want, I only want the best of the best players in there. But when it comes to Christmas movies, I'm willing to accept a lot of different types of movies for Christmas movies, because I think Christmas itself is such a huge thing in our country. I don't even know. I mean, holiday, I guess, is the best term to describe it, because it is, everybody gets the time off from work and everything. But it is such a massive mover of everything in this country that I think just having a small, slim definition of what makes a Christmas movie doesn't do justice to what Christmas means to so many different people in so many different ways. I mean, people celebrate in so many different ways. They have different rituals, different traditions. And I think, like you said, like, Reindeer Games, movies like that, I think it's, there's no need for people to be limiting or gatekeeping what a Christmas movie is, because, I mean, again, I would take any of those three that you mentioned over what we just watched, which was still a Christmas movie. And it was, it had its moments, but, any of those were really great movies. And they still kind of did, like you said, they kind of had still some of that message of bringing the family together, which is, ultimately what Christmas movies do.
And I mean, you bring up a good point that what the holidays means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and the movies mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I mean, people that I'm kind of like a little too old to kind of like be into Home Alone. That kind of was like after my time, but like I can't begrudge anybody that puts on their ugly sweater. Gets the family on the couch and watches it every year. I don't begrudge anybody for watching any genre of movie, because people are going to watch what they're going to watch, and if it brings them joy, then that's great. And Christmas movie is a genre of unto itself. So hey, man, I can't begrudge anyone that sits and wraps presents or makes pies, and they got the Hallmark Channel on 24/7, and they're watching Christmas. That's what they like. More power to them. And I think some of that gets lost, especially like sometimes in the horror community. There's a lot of like gatekeeping, like you said, and about sequels and remakes and stuff. And it's just watch what you want to watch. There's so much stuff out there that you'll never watch it all anyway. So why even complain about a movie you might not even watch?
Right. Well, that's one thing I think that's interesting when you talk about that, because I think the action community is a little less, gatekeeping. Like, even if an action movie an action movie doesn't have to be The Expendables. It doesn't have to be Terminator for people to be like, yeah, that was a really good movie. I mean, you look at Scott Adkins and Jesse V. Johnson, all the stuff they're doing, but it doesn't even have to be at that level for people to find enjoyment out of it. I think we in that action fan community, I think that may be why we're more forgiving of other genres as well. Like, we're more willing to watch a sci-fi movie or a horror movie that isn't like this absolute like stunner and has like the absolute best effects or something, because you can kind of see the enjoyment out of it in other ways. And I think that's the problem. Yeah, like you talked about with the gatekeeping aspect of it, that people just have this idea of like what a movie has to be, and they won't accept anything else. Whereas we're kind of in that mode of like, if you like it, you like it, and you don't, and hey, that's good enough.
I mean, I will gatekeep the Dakota movies though, because they need to be held at that level of auteur filmmaking. But yeah, I mean, they're, even something, like a PM movie in the 90s, like there's a couple people that would watch one or two and say, okay, well, that's enough. And then there are guys like you and me where we notice these things that kind of happen from film to film, like them reusing a car chase, or, Lawrence Hilton Jacobs being in like all the, this whole series. At first you're like, are these connected? Are these sequels? Are they, and then we kind of dig a little deeper and we start, appreciating them for, what they are. And, a lot of times, and, this is true for Santa Summer Home. It's a product. It's meant to be out there so people can consume it. And a lot of times, a lot of these filmmakers, they knock it all, they knock it off, and they go on to the next one. And when you're dealing with that kind of mentality, the junk kind of piles up a little bit. But I mean, we keep looking for pearls, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think too, like, if you're an action fan, if you're into, especially the careers of some of the people that are in this film, or like you said, you're David DeCoteau fan from before, if it's one of the other directors like Fred Olen Ray or Wynorski, there are little things that you can glean from it or have fun with in it. That I think helps as well. I wouldn't say Santa Summer Home is something that everybody should just get out right now and go onto Prime and just like, you're gonna love it, and it's an hour and a half of just pure entertainment. But I know like some people, people got a kick out of it when I reviewed The Wrong Child with Gary Daniels in it, because they were just really curious. Like, I didn't even know he did this movie, and this is really fascinating that that he was in this. And I think sometimes that's what happens with some of these stars, where you get so far down their filmography, and you've seen so many of their films, that it's interesting to try out some of these ones that are a little bit off the beaten path. And again, with someone like a DeCoteau, to kind of see how does he handle the Christmas film genre after doing some of these films that he's done before.
Yeah, I mean, with Daniels and guys like Bernhardt, I mean, they're just as prolific now as they were, in the 90s. And I mean, as well as I do, guys like Dolph and Stallone and Van Damme and even Seagal, like, they keep just churning them out. And Bruce Willis, I mean, like, I think there was like 3 new Bruce Willis movies on Prime when I was looking for this one. I was like, I got to hunker down and start watching these, because I'm falling behind. And that's the risk you run when you're a fan like we are, because it's just, there's so much of it now that it's you just keep juggling back and forth between your favorite action stars.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that COVID has maybe helped in that sense, is that we were able to catch up, because I think this is the first year, and I don't know how long, that there was no Dolph Lundgren movie or no Steven Seagal movie released. I think if you go back from like 2019 and before, I mean, I think Seagal was like, Seagal has slowed down a little bit anyway, but he was pumping out like 2 or 3 year. Dolph was doing the same thing, and this is the first year, and I don't know how long, that neither of them have a film out this year. And I mean, who knows, maybe next year. Like, I think Dolph has maybe started to film Castle Falls again, that he was doing with Adkins. But yeah, it gives us a chance to catch up on the ones that we may have missed with some of them, because they pump them out. They can, and it seems like they all work with directors and line producers and whatnot, that they know what they want. And I mean, like Seagal usually works with Keone Waxman. Dolph a lot of times works with I think it's Giorgio Serafini, I think his name is. I mean, names that, people that it's almost like they're co-directors in a sense, where they're talking about what they want or what they need out of the movie. And it's amazing how so many of them are still. And I think that's one of the problems. I think it's one of the things for guys stars like Daniels and Bernhardt and Rothrock, is that it's hard for them to get movies when Seagal and Van Damme are still Seagal and Dolph and them, and now even like Stallone is doing direct video stuff, and Bruce Willis. They're taking up so much space in there in the ecosystem that they have to find movies wherever they can get them.
Yeah, I mean it's like you said, Daniels is doing the Lifetime movies and this and I think Bernhardt has a good like backup where he could be I think he's been Keanu Reeves' stunt double. He's been a couple high profile stunt doubles for a few movies, so I think they're not exactly hurting.
Yeah.
But there is a point where they're not going to be able to do the spin kicks and everything anymore, and so they do need to start venturing out into other possibilities.
Yeah, and I think with Dan or with Lundgren, I saw he was on Scott Adkins has a show on YouTube where he interviews all the different martial artists, and I'm like way behind on it. People keep telling me like, oh, I'll like review somebody's movie and they'll say, hey, did you see the interview he did with Adkins? And I was like, no, I haven't seen it yet. But he was talking to Lundgren, and I guess Lundgren hurt his hip at some point, and he just can't do the kicks like he used to, he said. And it's kind of like, he's at that point age-wise where, I mean, I think he's a little over 60 at this point. And, it's like when they get an injury at that point, it's harder for it to heal. And so I think that makes it even harder, too, when they're doing these movies where it's probably easier for them to get injured because they're not as spry and getting out of the way of things. But then when they do get injured, it lingers a lot longer, too.
Right. And, when they're making 3 to 4 movies a year, it's like, do you want to lose a year to heal, or do you want to still grind out 3 or 4 movies and just kind of be in a limited capacity?
Yeah. And I think that's another thing you were talking about where this movie comes in, I think, really well for the stars that were in it, is that, other than the croquet scene, there's really nothing happening in this movie that takes a toll on these actors.
It took a toll on me.
Right, exactly. So they don't have to worry about possibly hurting themselves. And again, noticing that brace that Rothrock had in some of the scenes. I mean, I know I've heard that, I think she tore a ligament in Hong Kong before she did a movie there, and it's like, a lot of these actors, it's the kind of thing where, like, if it was a player in a sports league, if they had that injury, we wouldn't hear from them for months. They'd be out for a long time. But with a lot of these actors, it's like, okay, I got to do the movie still. I think sometimes they would even hide the injury and just want to be, because they wouldn't want to get recast or get cut from the film. There's no collective bargaining agreement with actors for that kind of thing. It's like, when you get injured, you're out, and especially in Hong Kong. So she probably did even more damage to it by acting through it. I can't remember what movie that was. I don't know if it was The Magic Crystal or 24 Hours to Midnight. One of those. It was one she did with Richard Norton. But she said, yeah, if you watch it, you'll notice she doesn't do certain kicks in the film.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many of her Hong Kong movies, but I do remember Righting Wrongs was with Yuen Biao. That was fantastic.
Yeah. I think she said he's her favorite person to act opposite. But I mean, obviously, she did a lot of great ones with Norton as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that one thing I could tell though with her in this movie is it didn't feel like the other two were, like anybody else in the film who had that background, where it seemed like for her she was like leaning into this and really just wanted to act and show that she could act and be Mrs. Claus, which was, I think, a lot of fun to kind of see her in that kind of role.
Yeah, I mean she did a good job. She's always had like that bubbly kind of personality, which is a good fit for the character, and even she had good chemistry with Chris Mitchum too, and it was like, well, maybe with a bit better circumstances, this could have been a good Christmas movie, but the rest of the film, Croquet, kind of left us hanging.
Yeah. And I mean, there were a lot of different things, I think, that were kind of like the cliches in the movie that almost felt like DeCoteau. I mean, they're probably in the script, and probably the script writers put them in because they felt like they had to put them in. And then it felt like DeCoteau was covering them in this almost perfunctory way that like when you're watching them, you're just like, it almost feels like it's not even developing properly. And so then as it moves from stage to stage in the film, it's almost like, wait a second, how did we get from here to here? But it's like we know we're supposed to be there. Like with Bernhard and Jessica Morris's character, where there's that sort of will they, won't they, sexual tension kind of thing. It was so disjointed throughout the film that, it's like, oh, you can tell she really likes you, and Bernhardt's, really? She likes me? And it's like, we couldn't even tell that she liked her, but we knew that she was supposed to like him because that's how those movies work. But they just didn't play that kind of thing out well.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you have the first 10 minutes of a cargo van driving around aimlessly, and then people milling about the foyer of a house, and then a 10-minute croquet game, and then all of a sudden they're like, we got to put a plot in here at some point. So about like 20 minutes before it's all over, there's the whole thing with the letters and the wishes and it like you said, it's like at that point in the movie, okay, well, something should happen now. Let's have something happen.
Yeah. And it is funny that you mentioned about the letters, and so this is a bit of a plot point in the film where the characters all discover that Chris Mitchum, in their mind, thinks he's Santa Claus, right? So some of the characters maybe think he could still be Santa Claus. Others really think this whole thing's ridiculous, which makes sense. That's probably how we'd all feel. And so he has to prove to them that he's Santa Claus. And the funny thing is that, I mean, he created a weather event to waylay their van, so the van got lost and came up to Santa's summer house. He also was able to change their bookings so that they'd get double booked in that time. So he obviously has some very extreme magical powers. I mean, obviously, bearing the lead, the fact that he's omnipresent as well, and he can be in multiple houses at once to be able to drop off presents. You'd think he could maybe just snap his fingers and show them that he's Santa Claus. That would have been all it took. But I guess the letters were what he had to use. He felt like he needed to do it that way. But yeah, I was I kind of thought like the letter aspect. I don't know if that would have done it for me, but I guess I mean I don't know about you, but I whenever I wrote letters to Santa, they that was it. Like they who knows what my parents did, but they probably threw them out or something once they transcribed the actual things that I wanted and crossed off the ones that they weren't going to get.
Well, it's still funny that in this day and age that people getting lost and being welcomed into a stranger's home for not one but like multiple days. Right. Like that's like something that happened in like the movies in the 30s and 40s, right. And even in the 70s, like with the horror movies, it was still kind of pushing it. But you're okay. But like in 2012, watching it in 2020, and like, does that still happen? That people just like, well, come on in, we got plenty of room. I'm like, it just seemed like a touch from like another era.
Right. Yeah. I mean, really, it's a very great horror movie plot, right? Where it's like, these people are in this house, and then, Stephen King would write this perfectly. And I mean, I did get a touch of that when they start to have their doubts about who, they start to realize like, oh, this guy thinks he's Santa Claus. If that was in real life, if you went to somebody's mansion to stay with them and suddenly you discover that he thinks he's Santa Claus, now it's like, oh man, what's going to happen next? Is he going to try to force everybody to dress up like elves and act out some crazy, Christmas scene or something before he starts, picking people off? And I mean, that could be the movie, right? That maybe, they don't use their martial arts so much, but maybe that's what it is that Chris Mitchum is, he's some kind of twisted psychopath that thinks he's Santa Claus, and he and Rothrock have trapped these people here, and maybe Rothrock's an unwitting partner, who knows? But that's what they have to. Maybe there's mercenaries that show up on the grounds and keep everybody locked in.
There's Stockholm syndrome, then there's North Pole syndrome.
Right, exactly. Yes, I mean that could be another way to have done this as a Die Hard in the mansion kind of thing, where it's this crazy guy has everybody trapped in here, and how do you get people out, and how do you and that of course would have made the relationship thing between Daniel Bernhardt and Jessica Morris's character make more sense, right? Because those kind of characters in that kind of environment, they always become a couple, as long as they all survive the film. I think the younger sister would be an easy one to pick off. She's an extraneous character. You could just dump her really quickly. I don't know if we start to kill off anybody. That's the other problem too. I guess you'd have to add people to this cast that can be killed off easily. I think the van driver would have to go, unfortunately. Yeah, there's no just going back to the resort. No, he'd get picked off first, perhaps. But you know what it is they go to try to escape and they find him in the van dead. Like they tap on the window, like, we got to get out of here. And his head moves over and his eyes are like open, and he hits his head on the glass on the window, the door, something like that.
And he's got like garland wrapped around his throat. And...
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's the other version of this, the alternate version that DeCoteau should have made. Maybe, when you consider how quickly he makes these, you wonder if that's possible to make two movies at the same time. I know of directors that have done that, where they'll, create the same two movies at once with the same cast. Mm-hmm. And just, it's part of the B-movie thing. When you're working on a budget like that, you find ways to make movies any way you can. I mean, that would have been an interesting concept to have made two movies at the same time. One of them sort of more like this murder type thing, where the characters that, the stars that we're used to get to use some of their martial arts abilities.
Yeah, I mean, they used to do the kind of like the hot version of the movies, where they would do the cable inserts or whatever, and so it's not too far away. I mean, even like when they did the Mexican version of Dracula, they had the crews working day and night, and they had that was a little bit different situation, but they still made two movies in the time that most people make one. So I think it would have been definitely doable.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been funny. I mean, I think for stars like this, they like to have multiple. I mean, Jessica Morris, again, she's used to working on that David DeCoteau schedule, and she probably has worked in that kind of capacity where she's done two movies in the same week with him or something like that. And I feel like with Rothrock and Daniels especially, having done movies in Hong Kong, I feel like action, B-movie action stars, they must be used to working on those tight schedules as well. Probably better than maybe somebody who's coming from the big screen ranks who's then moving down. They're probably not as used to that kind of a tense schedule.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably memorizing lines for the movie that they're making next week while they're in the trailer for this one, if there is a trailer. Right. So there are some. I know, like in television a lot, if they're on a series or whatever, they'll spend the week filming the series and then spend the weekend filming the movie. Yeah. So that they're working on. So it's conceivable that when they weren't being used, they were on another set somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder again with this idea that and I don't know if Olin Ray and Wynorski do this as well, but I'm pretty sure DeCoteau does all of these movies in the LA area. And I wonder if that's a selling point for these stars, the fact that they probably can just go home after shooting for the day, that they don't even have to be necessarily in a trailer. They can just, they don't have to be put up anywhere. Craft services is there, but they can actually have dinner at home, depending on how long they shoot for, of course. I mean, if they're shooting late into the night, that's different. But I wonder if that's a selling point for them, that they can just, they're not on location so far. I mean, Malibu, I imagine that's, just shoot down the Pacific Coast Highway back to wherever their houses are.
And I mean, it might not even be in the budget for accommodations, so they might have to stay at home.
Right. Well, that might be part of it. Is like, when they're casting, when the casting director has to look for people that are willing to go back home and after the shooting for the day. And so, yeah, that's part of the process. Maybe. I mean, you wonder with these casting directors if they have a whole different thing. I mean, I heard that with Woody Allen, it's just like, his casting director will just call people and just be like, yeah, we're not going to pay you anything, but you get to work with Woody Allen. And that's how he gets people in his films. I wonder if it's different with these, where it's like, yeah, you're going to be working with David DeCoteau, you're going to be shooting on a rough schedule, but you get to go back to your house in LA after, as opposed to, selling it that way, as opposed to, yeah, we've got lush accommodations for you or something like that.
And I mean, that's, I don't think any of those guys are strangers to kind of roughing it in that aspect. And I'm sure when they work, it's 14, maybe 16-hour days. And, somebody was probably crashing in the half-car sofa in the living room while they were filming out. Other people were filming out in the Kris Kringle's private room.
Yeah, I know Rothrock went on her YouTube channel. She'll interview people that she's worked with, or she'll just like talk about what happened when she made movies. And she was talking with Richard Norton, and they were talking about doing films in Hong Kong and how like they would be doing 14-hour days, and how I guess there was something that Richard Norton was able to pull. I think it was for the Magic Crystal Boat. It was for something like that, where he had his wife there with him when they were shooting, but he pulled something with the director so that he wouldn't be doing those long days. I don't know if he was just like, I won't do your movie if you make me do these long. I can't remember what it was, but he came up with some way to get out of doing those long days. But yeah, you make a great point, because I think they're all used to that, those kinds of schedules.
And I mean, that's like you said, there won't be any money in it for you, but you're in a movie. I mean, that's how like a lot of the they rope a lot of the younger people in there, and I guess they keep the older names, and like I said, they've all worked on movies together. So I mean, it's just probably an excuse to hang out and just kind of chit chat, catch up before they all go to their next project.
Yeah, I mean, this film's cast, I mean, it's literally like what? I'm it on IMDb here. I think it's literally 9 people in the film total, which is, again, from a price, from a cost standpoint, I mean, to only have 9 people in the movie is, obviously that means you probably can pay Daniels and Rothrock a little bit more to get them on board, and then the other actors, they're just happy to be in a movie. I think like the younger sister, for example, the van driver, the son was his first movie. I think for them, they're willing to take a little less to be in a movie like this. So, maybe Daniels, I mean, I don't know what the number is. I'm thinking, maybe 50, 60 grand. I don't know what that number is, but it's probably one of those things where, yeah, I mean, I think probably everything about this movie for the people involved was like just work, except for the fact that the film itself didn't exactly work.
Well, they had to save money for the snowman Christmas card looking transition scenes where it's like it'll wipe from scene to scene and play like public domain Christmas music and like wish the one scene and then into the next scene. They had to pay for that somehow.
Yeah, those were great. The Kurosawa George Lucas screen wipes that were used with Christmas decorations, like cartoon looking Christmas decorations, which was fantastic.
I mean, because at first they used them pretty regularly, and then they kind of forgot about them by the end. I was like, I was hoping that one of those transition wipes would come through during the croquet scene, but no such luck.
I know, we needed to be saved by one of those transition wipes. That's what we were hoping for. Now, looking at the cast, I completely forgot about one other aspect of this. David DeCoteau is credited as Mary Crawford in this film. He's not even listed as David DeCoteau. So that's one thing to keep in mind for people if you look this up, that, yes, it says it's directed by Mary Crawford, but it's actually directed by David DeCoteau.
And he did that, too, in his full moon movies. If he was doing, like, the Skinamax movies, I think he went by Ellen Cabot.
Yes.
I don't know, I guess maybe if you're using a pseudonym and you put a woman's name instead of a man's, I guess it's maybe would soften the blow if it's not good. I don't know what the thinking is there, yeah. But if you watch it and you picture Mary Crawford being this like nice little old lady, like, who just wants to make a nice happy little Christmas movie. I don't know, but yeah, I never knew it, but I read somewhere with Wynorski and Ray where when they had their pseudonyms, like Jay Andrews and Fred Raymond, I think was Fredo and Ray's. They only did that because then the market is saturated with movies directed by Jim Wynorski. So they had, if you're at the video store, this is like the early 2000s, you're at the video store, every other title in the horror section has Jim Wynorski's name. you're like, whoa, wait a second. So they actually, it wasn't like he was ashamed of those movies. It was just too much product with your names on it, like a red flag goes up.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm seeing the funny thing is I'm looking at his 2000s output, and almost everything is Nicholas Medina. So it's almost like even though he was using the pseudonym to sort of not saturate the market, he was saturating it himself. I think Nicholas Medina, Fred Olen Reyes, Nicholas Medina had 4 movies in '06 or something like that. So.
And they were probably all with bikini in the title.
They were, yes, they literally were. Bikini Girls from the Lost Planet, Ghost in a Teeny Bikini, The Bikini Escort Company, Bikini Chain Gang. Oh, actually, Bikini Chain Gang was 2005, and then the only one that he did that was credited to himself was The Legend of William Tell.
Okay.
Yeah, I should check that out. I bet it's I bet that one is a it's actually an Ed Begley Jr. movie.
Wow.
I was thinking it might have Tim Abel in it because it seems like he would do a lot of these kind of movies with Tim Abel, but it looks like a family movie of some sort.
Yeah, well, he would like occasionally do like a random like Western, like I think it was was it American Outlaws with Peter Fonda? He'll randomly, and like I know he did like the Hatfield and McCoy's kind of ripoff. So I mean, and he can do Westerns. He can do any genre. I think, when he's allowed to kind of riff on a genre that he's not used to, I think he kind of jumps at that chance.
Yeah. And to his credit, bringing up the American Outlaws, the Jesse James one, I gave that movie a real hard time because it felt like it was sort of like celebrating the Confederacy, and it didn't really mention some of the aspects of the Confederacy, like slavery, as bad things. And so I really killed that movie. And then I think I went and did another one of his. I think the one that he did with Wynorski, one that he did with Wynorski together. And to his credit, he just said, "Hey, thanks for the review on the Wynorski," which told me he read the other review where I killed his movie, and he didn't, get in the comment section and be like, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know what this movie, all that kind of stuff. He was just like, thank me for the other one, which in a way is a more passive aggressive, but I think a better approach if somebody kills your movie is to, if they like the next one, thank them for liking the next one.
Yeah, the way those guys work, there probably wasn't time to change the script.
Right.
That's the script. You got to shoot it, and whatever objections you have. But then again, I mean, I'm sure that I hate to say it, but the attended audience for that movie is probably like a MAGA hat wearing somebody
right.
who would probably, not even think twice about that kind of political kind of statement. But it's funny too, because a lot of the like they have the same kind of stable of screenwriters a lot of times, and so I don't know if there was an objection anywhere down the line, but I'm sure like if it wasn't ironed out, it was strictly due to budget or scheduling.
Yeah, and that's something that I've learned a lot of. I think, in hearing, because sometimes, these directors will talk about the process or, what it's like, or sometimes you watch commentaries and you hear about it a little bit and you get a better sense of where all of this stuff comes from. And then suddenly, the croquet scene, which was like you said, it was rock climbing for us and we needed a screen wipe to save us from it. But you get a sense of like, okay, why would a director do something like that in a movie? And you realize he probably had no choice that the movie came in under the time that he was, when they edited it out and realized, this movie is 10 minutes too short. Well, where can we add to the film now that our stars are all across the world doing other films or whatever? How do we add? Oh, well, we've got all this croquet footage, and let's just keep recycling it and adding it in like that. And of course, for us, we watch it and we're like, oh, this is horrible. Like, when are you gonna, save a, when are you gonna, when is the film gonna fade out and move on to the next scene? But that's, those are the things that they had to do to make those movies work.
And another tell was the beginning with the van driver, where he's narrating and you think he's going to be like the main character. He's just the guy that drops him off.
Right.
And there's this long scene of the van like slowly going up the road, and you're like, why is this even in the movie? And you realize that Oh, well, the first thing they shot was them coming out of the van, and they had no scenes of them in the van to set up their characters.
Right.
So, I mean, that was like 5 or 6 minutes right there of extra screen time that you can get if you have a mandated 90-minute running time.
Yeah, and there was also the opening credit sequence was long, if I remember too. It was like I don't know if they were showing the ocean or something, but it was like a long period of just like a name, 30 seconds. I think it was like 4 minutes almost of just opening credits as well.
And then they do the thing at the end of the where they bring everybody back and show a little quick montage of the scenes that that they were in, and that runs. And then I think the titles were running super slow, and half the time they're fake names in there anyway, because they probably only had 6 or 7 guys manning the crew.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, because you see that a lot with the Fred Olen Ray movies too, right? Where when they wrap up the movie, the movie ends, and before they go into the full credits, you see the people that were in the film. And this one made a little bit more sense because there were only 9 people in the film, so it was you couldn't leave anybody out. But I've always been fascinated by what makes them decide who should be in that montage at the end and who gets left out, because sometimes it'll be someone who had like one scene and they show them there and like, oh, so and so, and it's like, really, I don't even remember that person being in the movie, and you're telling me that who they were in the credits. So I always get a kick out of that.
Well, they do that a lot in like the bikini movies, and like if you notice, all those bikini movies are 81 minutes.
Right.
And it's like that's like the magic number, I think. And half of them kind of peter out at 72 minutes. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like every blessed person gets a little, and it'll even be dialogue scenes. It won't just be a quick little 3-second montage. It's like they'll replay a whole scene, and if that doesn't work, they'll do a blooper reel, and then
yes, I do.
You're in trouble if the blooper reel isn't running concurrent with the credits.
Right.
Because when you see that, it's just time to turn it off. It's probably still got 20 minutes left on it. I'm more forgiving if the blooper reel is running over the credits, or but when they just show the blooper reel to show that, first of all, if Jackie Chan or Burt Reynolds isn't in the blooper reel, you probably shouldn't have a blooper reel. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, what it feels like is, remember in school, where that the teacher, professor, whoever would assign a paper, and it would have a length, a required length that it needed to be. Yeah. And so it was like, okay, what are the ways that I can stretch this out? Like, okay, first off, maybe I can change the font. I can make the spacing a little bit heavier. And then also, then it's like also like, okay, I used one word to explain this. Can I explain the same thing in 5 words? Can I use like a huge extended analogy? Like can I put in a quote, make a whole block quote or something like that? It almost feels like they're trying to extend the paper so they can reach the word limit for the teacher with these movies sometimes.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a good analogy, because I'm kind of guilty of it too, because sometimes I know my reviews, I kind of know where I want to kind of come in at word wise, and if I start using like, and then in the meantime, like that like just those little kind of stock phrases just kind of thrown in there. It's like, I'm trying to get this thing up to like 400 words, and I'm having trouble doing so.
That's I know with mine, it's like I always have that 8-paragraph format, and so like the first paragraph is the intro, the second one's the synopsis, and the last one is the wrap up. And a lot of times I'll have trouble with that 7th one that's like the one right before the wrap up, and so it's always something that has nothing to do with the movie. A lot of times, or like some like really like tangential thing, like like, oh, I think there was one where like I'd see like a Miami Dolphins hat, and I'd be like, oh, this movie took place at this time. Dan Marino was still the quarterback of the Dolphins at that time, or something, and it has nothing to do with the film. And then it's like gives me like the segue too, to be like, okay, if we're talking about this, it's time to wrap up this review. But it's always like that paragraph really has no reason to be there except for me to pad out the review. So I've got the 8 paragraphs that I'm looking for.
But I'm sure Roger Ebert had to do that too. I'm sure he had his column length, because sometimes he will go on tangents. Yeah. About movies, and did he even watch the movie? Right. So it's just come by it any way you can.
Yes. For sure. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about before we wrap up in terms of Christmas movies is I think the last year when you were on around this time, we talked about your favorite Christmas movie of all time, which is Elves. I don't know if that one's still your favorite.
Yeah, because of COVID, we're not going to have the typical party where we have friends over to watch it. But I'm definitely on the 23rd. It's kind of the tradition is to watch Elves, and it's funny because like I actually met my wife on the 23rd of December, so that I got to make sure like we go to lunch or something. We do something together before that, and then it's like, well, we're gonna watch Elves, and she usually taps out before, the finale of that. So, but it's one of those things where it's a tradition, and I look forward to it, and I still, we've been watching it since probably 92,
Wow.
93 perhaps. And every year, we went from renting it, and then we went to rent it one year. They said, "You're the only person who's rented this. Do you want to just buy it?" We're like, "Sure." So yeah, we took it home, and even though I've seen it probably close to 30 times, I still pick out kind of new things in the background. I'm still, it's just like a gift that keeps on giving. It has what has got to be Dan Haggerty's best performance of all time. And he's so earnest. I mean, if you took his scenes out of context, you would think that you were watching a regular Christmas movie, because he has these really kind of beautifully acted, monologues, and he has the sad puppy dog eyes, and and he'll be delivering it, and then it's, well, tell me about the Nazi elves. And it totally, whatever illusion it just shattered. So, and I would recommend that one to anyone out there who thinks that they've seen it all, because it's the only movie I can think of that rips off both Chinatown and Dawn of the Dead. So.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I should mention, if you go to Dan Haggerty's IMDb page, it's actually in his little brief bio underneath his picture. It's the second film that he's listed for. He was an actor known for. They list Big Stand from 2007 first, and then Elves second. And so I think that's really interesting that's the movie that they list here for that. But my favorite scene, I think, of Elves, because I did watch it after you mentioned it last year. I had to check it out. I love when the kids are partying in the mall after it closes, and Dan Haggerty is still hanging out there because he's the Santa Claus or whatever. And I think he was planning on like relaxing there or something after it closed. And he's like telling them like, okay, you guys can do so as long as you don't break things here. And I just loved Dan Haggerty as the responsible adult amongst these kids. It just was like the funniest idea that he's just like, okay, kids, go ahead, do like they're looking at him like he's going to get us in trouble if we don't. If he tells on us or whatever like that, or he could tell us to leave or something. That idea and the way he did it too, he was like, okay, you kids, whatever. Was just, I got a kick out of that part.
And I mean, it's that permissive paternal father figure that the main character's been missing all her life. So it totally fits. Like I said, I've seen this 30 times. So I pick up on stuff like that where, he kind of fills this void in her life, for that short amount of time that they're together, where the grandfather slapping her, the mother's grounding her, the kids, her brother just wants to see her tits. She has a bad home life. She needs that kind of direction in her life.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, that's a good point too. I mean, they definitely like, when you think of like the Cinderella with the evil stepsisters trope or film device, they take that up like a bunch of notches, where she's just like living in the absolute worst environment that she, like the mother is horrible, the grandfather's even worse. Yeah, like everything about that place is it's like they couldn't make it bad enough. It's like it seems like they would be like, okay, we're gonna make this this, and what, that's not bad enough, let's add something else to what the mom does, and I don't think she's bad enough, let's have her do this instead. And then on top of all this, then you've got the the elves, which are like a Nazi experiment that are out there. It's like a killing device. So not only does she have this horrible home life, but then we've got a killer elf that's on the loose as well.
And it's funny too. There's a whole sequence and we laugh at it now, but I know probably people who are watching it for the first time, the duct tape sequence will probably be, for a lot of people, the croquet sequence from Santa's Summer House, because there's this whole subplot about duct taping the door. And there's door in the duct tape, and then the girl comes, there's no duct tape on the door, and then he comes back, he puts duct tape on the door, then the guys can't get in the party because there's no on the door, and it's like was this film sponsored by the Duct Tape Corporation?
Right, exactly. I mean, just the idea of like a mall, I guess it's like in like some kind of urban environment, and the fact that like the back door is like this, like, I mean, the idea that this mall is just, like the lock for the back door. It seems like, I'm surprised people weren't just breaking in and robbing the mall.
Well, it was a big department store. It was
right.
Gollum's department store, so it was a throwback to that old, timey, not quite mall aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it was almost kind of like a Miracle on 34th Street vibe to it. But then again, the scenes where they're hanging out in the store definitely have like a Night of the Comic kind of vibe to it. Where they're trying on all the clothes and playing dress up and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point when you think about it, because 1989, I think you still had some of those. I mean, I remember in my hometown, there was still a department store in the downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire area that was on its way out. Like there was a mall in the neighboring town, and they had just built a bigger mall in that same area that was going to run the smaller mall out of business, and it also killed off some of those kind of downtown department stores that at that time you still had that kind of thing. That's a good point. I didn't even think of that a few years later you really could you would really be a throwback to have a downtown department store, especially in a town that's not like a big city, because the malls at that time were starting to run all of those kind of businesses out.
Which is a good point too, because that's probably how they got to film in there, because it was probably on its way out. Yeah. They probably were able to film there very cheaply.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's a great point. Yeah, that that place was probably not doing the kind of business, and so they probably could use the infusion of cash to have the movie pay to be in there in the middle of the night.
Because it even has the donut shop in there, the coffee shop in there. So you got to think back how long ago it was when stores like that had a lunch counter.
Yeah.
And I mean, for a lot of today's generation, they would say, what's a what?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's still stores like Boscov's that have like chocolates or but even there were stores that had like a whole diner within the store, so you could go get something to eat while you're shopping.
Yeah. I mean, like Kmart. Kmart had the diner. I remember getting grilled cheese in Kmart as a kid, and of course, I don't remember at what point they closed that whole thing down. Of course, there was also you could smoke in that area as well, so you were eating a grilled cheese while like older ladies were smoking and probably like waiting for the next blue light special announcement to go off, and at that time all that stuff was considered legitimate. Like you didn't think twice about that. And now you're right. Like I think if you were to show that kind of thing to kids and say, here's this place Kmart, it was a huge shopping destination where a lot of people went, but also you could eat there and smoke inside there. It was like all of that would be a lot for them to take, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I see. I'm an old soul anyway, so I take that stuff for granted. Like I see stuff, but could you do Elves just that way? Nowadays, with I guess you could. I guess you could use like a Walmart or a place like that. But even then, like the concept of like kind of sneaking in to like a mall or a store after hours. It kind of like very kind of feels like a very 80s or 90s kind of dream. Like I know like career opportunities was kind of like that, and like the like the whole kind of like Toys R Us sweepstakes where you could get like a shopping cart and go through and just take whatever you wanted. I don't think people or like kids today really have that kind of dream about like, oh, let's stay in a store after hours. I don't think that plays to a new generation.
No, and you make a great point, and I think too, like you think, the logistics of it with a Walmart or something like that. Like if you're going to do the equivalent to a Walmart, like a fictional equivalent, one, I mean, there's cameras, like multiple cameras on every aisle hanging from the ceiling. So I guess it would have to be a friend who works the security at night that can like put in a tape of, the store like looking normal, I guess, so that somebody else who went back and saw it wouldn't think that they were that people were hanging out there or something. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects of this film that and I'm sure this film took liberties with the truth a little bit, obviously, because you've got elves as a Nazi, killer elves as a Nazi experiment. So that in and of itself is we're not stretching credulity. Obviously, it's kind of like that joke about like the Gilligan's Island episode with the Harlem Globetrotters, and one of them sprains an ankle and Gilligan goes into play, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, like Gilligan would be allowed to play." Like everything else in that show was believable, but the fact that Gilligan was going to be playing basketball with the Harlem Globetrotters was too much. I'm saying that the department store would stretch credulity when you've got killer elves in the film. So I guess you could probably do whatever you wanted to from that point in terms of the cameras and all of that. But you make a great point that I think like these places like Walmart, there's an element to them. I mean, Target maybe is a little bit nicer and a little bit more fun. So I guess you could maybe dress up a Target, and that might be a place that kids would want to hang out in. But yeah, I mean, I think kids don't see those stores the way they used to. Now it's like maybe more like Amazon wish lists and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, unless they went with a Starbucks or something, all the lattes they can drink or something.
Right.
That just aspect of the culture I just don't think kind of translates now. I mean, and even with the aspect of security, like you said, like security cameras everywhere. In 1989, all you needed was a roll of duct tape, and you were good to go.
Right. I mean, stores like that would have like one or two cameras, and they would be really obvious where they were. And I mean, obviously we've seen Point Break. We saw how easy it was for Patrick Swayze and his gang to take out the one or two cameras in a bank. And so, department stores didn't really. I mean, those were kind of new things at that time. And I mean, yes, closed circuit cameras have been around for a while, but for companies to be able to do them affordably, that was starting to be a new thing where companies would do that. It was like, you've got to get a camera. Whereas, at that time, things like shoplifting and things like that, it was more about, did the person on the floor catch somebody stealing, as opposed to, oh, we can see it in the camera, we can see what they're doing there.
Yeah, well, I mean, those places had like store detectives.
Yeah.
Like, I think nowadays they just have like a security guard or one cop that's making a little bit extra money, so the whole concept of security is a lot different, I think, now. So but then again, who knows? The technology for killer mutant Nazi elves could advance equally. So.
Right. Well, and one thing to mention too is, I mean, it could be a situation where maybe people are working third shift because Walmart stays open 24 hours during the holiday season. So that could be what it is. Instead of a party, it's more like people are partying at the Walmart while it's open. Like, oh, we don't get a lot of customers in here. Let's, crack open a drink or something like that and like do it on the sly. And then, of course, too, you can have that cliche of the security camera footage. So it like shows the elf walking around, like, you see from the security camera, you see the elf walking, and then you go to like real camera footage of the elf walking. So it's a way, I guess, they save money with cinematography.
Well, not that matters any, because it was clearly walking around the floor during peak business hours and nobody noticed it.
Right. Right.
It's like, It's like that whole long sequence too. It's got the blurry elf vision. He's going through the aisles, and I mean, they say he has magical powers, so easily hidden, can't be seen. So maybe that you can attribute it to that, but they didn't really convey that filmmaking wise.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of maybe having the elf out there in a place like a Walmart in regular business hours, and people are just so obsessed with getting their shopping done and their shopping lists that like nobody notices. Like maybe like there's like a Cabbage Patch doll equivalent that everybody's after at that time, or a Tickle Me Elmo kind of thing, and like they're so obsessed with getting that they don't notice the killer elf that's walking around near them.
Well, yeah, that would be the perfect metaphor for consumerism and greed, I guess. For you're too busy looking at your shopping list when you don't notice that the Nazi elf that's about to bring about the Antichrist and the end of the world as we know it is lurking behind you.
Right, exactly. That's we're too much of a consumer culture, and the elf is there to show us the error of our ways.
And I mean, and that's the whole thing too. I mean, if anybody wants to argue that Elf is not a Christmas movie, I mean, it clearly takes place on Christmas, and but one twist is that the family is torn apart at the end, and they're not brought together. So, I mean, there's a whole lot made about it being anti-Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They're sisters of anti-Christmas, so it actually kind of deconstructs the standard structure of a Christmas movie, because at the beginning they are together, and then the dark secrets are revealed, and then by the end it's just her alone in the woods, and with the haunting final memorable image final image that I won't spoil.
Right.
But
yeah, you make a great point, because it's almost like some families are too toxic that Christmas magic shouldn't bring them together, right? Some families are so toxic that we need Christmas magic to split them apart. For a woman in her case, it's better for her to be apart from her family than as opposed to having to deal. And that's always a classic part. It's one of the things about Christmas, right? Is that people feel like they have to spend time with their relatives. But if your relatives are as toxic as the one she had, we should be celebrating somebody who doesn't have to spend time with them.
Which is why, Dan Haggerty made that perfect father figure,
Right.
/ Father Christmas / Santa Claus / detective / action hero. And there's even the whole scene where he does like the detective work, and finding out the mystical symbols, and then that great moment where he barges in on the professor during Christmas Eve dinner and demands to know about the connection between the Nazis and the elves, and the professor has to say this long-winded speech in front of the kids who are just, I don't know whose kids they were, but they were perfect. They just kind of look at it like they're kind of like the audience surrogate at that point. They're just like mouth agape, wide eyes, while the guy's going on about haploid sperm cells and, Nazis and master races and all this stuff. And it's just, it's one of the reasons why I refuse to call them so bad they're good movies. They're just, It's a Mitch movie. If it's about a Nazi killer elf, that's a Mitch movie. I'll watch it.
Yeah, I like that term of bitch movie, because I think you're right. Like, we always use that so bad it's good term, but I think it sometimes there's so many things happening in a movie that it's just hard not, it's so hard not to have fun with it, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, and bad, I mean, bad's too narrow, especially for someone who is, like you and me, who's familiar with the director's filmography or certain actors' career. We can kind of overlook some of the shortcomings of the movie and
Mm-hmm.
kind of focus on why we keep coming back to their movies again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this one's a fun one. I believe it's available on YouTube, if people want to check it out. I think it's on there. I think that's how I caught it last year. It may be available to stream too on like Tubi or one of those services.
Yeah, I think right now the only place you can see it is YouTube, because I think there's something with the rights is up in the air. I know Vinegar Syndrome, I think they wanted to put it out, but the fact that it was they only deal with film elements now, and I think it was filmed on film but edited on video. So
Oh,
that
right.
kind of that's why it kind of has that weird hazy something's not quite about this movie look about it, because it was kind of ran through a processor before it was edited.
Mm-hmm.
So but that's kind of what gives it its charm too. I think it just has like this like off-putting kind of film on everything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, because it's an Action International Pictures, and
Hmm.
so it says it had a theatrical release through them as well as being released through them on VHS. They were the first video to put it out, so that makes sense. I mean, AIP did all kinds of things in trying to get movies out. So, yeah, I don't I can imagine that being a situation there.
And I mean, which is a shame, because I feel like nowadays when they bring out a DVD, the lack of discovery for someone who's been collecting since DVDs have been available. I mean, that gets narrower and narrower, because it seems like the same couple movies are always being re-released on DVD, and there's so much out there on video that hasn't been properly given, even forget about Blu-ray, just a DVD release.
Yeah.
So I think we don't need another Evil Dead release on DVD. We don't need, it's just there's all these movies that they're great movies, but they just keep going to that same well again and again.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Man Killers, another Action International Pictures from, like, I think the year before Elves. I think it came out in '88. Maybe it's a little earlier than '88, but that one has a Blu-ray release. So if Man Killers has a Blu-ray release, which we were talking about a Dirty Dozen possibility, that was
Hmm.
another Dirty Dozen remake. But if that's got a Blu-ray, I think Elves definitely should have one.
I hope maybe that'll be our Christmas miracle this year.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. Well, Mitch, as we wrap up here, first, can you tell people where can they find you?
Oh, on you can look for me on Twitter. It's twitter.com / the video vacuum, and I'm on Blogspot, www.thevideovacuum.blogspot.com. And I've also released a few books collecting some of my scribblings and nonsense, reviews, and reappraisals of everything bad to mediocre to something like Santa's Summer House. My latest one is the Bloody Book of Horror, and that's available on Amazon. You just search the Bloody Book of Horror, or you just search other books for Mitch Lovell, and all my other books will you'll be able to see that.
Yeah, I have to say, because I got that one recently, Bloody Book of Horror, and one thing I think is really great about that book, for people that are looking for presents, gifts this time of year, and it might be, I'm going to be posting this, I think, on the 15th of December, which might fall in a tight window for a paperback with on-demand publishing, because it takes some time for them to put those out, but even if it's a little late for someone, I feel like, especially from a gift standpoint, people have these big horror film collections where they've got movies, they've got books, they've got, Funko dolls and all that kind of stuff. I think your book fits perfectly in that kind of a category where it's like, sure, someone can read it cover to cover, but it also works as like a reference guide where people can pick it up and read it. But also I really like the way the cover looks, so it's really great, I think, for for someone to put into their collection as well.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, and it was kind of designed to be like that. Like I tried to give chapters that were broad, but kind of still gave you an idea of what to expect from either a genre or a definitive time period, decade, and uh, they were fun to write because I kind of already know what I want to write about. And then there's a sense of discovery because nearly all of them I saw when they were first time watches, except for a few that I threw in there because they were just movies I always wanted to review. And I like that blend of, like you said, reference guide, but also like you could knock out a chapter in maybe 15-20 minutes and get a good idea of what that genre or that director has to offer. And the artist of that, his name's Pedro Mule, and he's been doing my covers for the past 3 or 4 books, and he's available on Facebook. And if anybody ever needs a good graphic designer, I mean, he's as good as they come.
Yeah, I thought that was really great. 'Cause I mean, I put my novel out, and I just was like, I just want a black background with the white words for it. And I might do that, continually for the novel. But I loved that cover, and I think, people, I think a lot of times, and I'm kind of in the same boat, and maybe yours as well, where life is a very, our lives are very busy right now. There's so much going on, and it's hard to find time to read something. And I think that's why people shy away from books a little bit more than they do, other things like DVDs and movies and things like that. And that's why I always try to, with a book like yours, it's yes, it's great as a book to read, but if you're someone who doesn't have time to read, but you've got, a collection, or, it's like, it's cheaper than adding a Blu-ray to your collection, but it kind of has the same function. It's adding a piece to the collection. And so I always like a book like that kind of has that dual function, where it can be, read cover to cover, or, if you don't have time to read something cover to cover, it still is a great piece for somebody to add to their horror collection.
Well, I think the best compliment I ever got was I had somebody tell me, he said, I have your book in my bathroom because when I go in there, is it's just long enough for me to read a chapter. I'm like, well, that's what it's designed for. It's like quick bites of, the broad strokes. And I mean, I've considered doing kind of more in-depth books, but there's something about that, 4 to 8 movie reviews a chapter, and then boom, you're on to the next one. That kind of flows quicker too. But also, it's good for me, the writer, because then I don't get bored. I'm not doing a deep dive into one particular subject. And, with horror, there's so many different facets, so many different eras, so many different stars, so many different directors that you can kind of cherry pick the best or worst from and just kind of explore, and then, okay, go into the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if you did deep dives, I think it would still have that quality of being something that, people can, because, even if it's in pieces, in that sense, I mean, it's still, like I said, it has that reference guide feel to it that I think is just, yeah, it just works. And I think for people who are hesitant to buy books, I think, a book like yours, if you're adding things to a collection or something like that, that's exactly what this does. I mean, I think your other books fit as well for people that are action fans who are listening to this. I know you've got your Expendable Guide to Action, which is another great one as well. So there are other genres too, for people that are curious about your books.
And right now I'm in the midst of editing a new one, which hopefully will be ready by maybe this time next year, but I'm doing one of all kung fu movies. And again, that'll be everything from the 70s Bruceploitation to today's modern DTV action, Scott Adkins, stuff like that, to the 80s junk, like the Godfrey Ho cut them up and paste them together movies. So hopefully y'all can look forward to that maybe this time next year, hopefully.
Excellent. Yeah, I would love to check that out. So, yeah, I mean, whenever it's ready, let us know, because that sounds like a really cool one to check out for sure.
Yeah, like I said, I just kind of follow my passions. Like if I see a lot on my to be watched pile or in my queue, I see themes kind of forming where I see, okay, well, I got 3 Bruce Willis movies. Maybe I can lump them together here. Maybe I can, and then for right now, on the site. I'm kind of doing a deep dive into the works of Ron Orman, who was, started out in the 50s doing Lash LaRue, directing Lash LaRue westerns, and then in the 60s he started doing straight up exploitation, Please Don't Touch Me, which is about hypnotism curing a frigid wife. And then he made probably one of the definitive monster and stripper movies called The Monster and the Stripper. In the late 60s, which is kind of like a really Russ Meyer Grindhouse type movie. And then he had 2 near-death experiences, gave himself over to Jesus, and then he made religious movies for this the remainder of his life, and they're just as warped as anything that he made for the drive-in. So it's really fascinating to kind of just like do a deep dive like that, and that way, if it's on the site, people can kind of look at it at their leisure.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I try to get into some of those older movies as well, in part because I think sometimes it gives you a better perspective on the directors that we were talking about today, like DeCoteau and in particular Fred Olen Ray. I think he was, or Wynorski. They were influenced by a lot of those kinds of movies, and it's always interesting to see things in those movies and be like, oh, that's where they got that from. That I recognize that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the body of work kind of speaks for themselves. When you look at a director who's got like maybe, I don't know how many Wynorski and Ray are up to now, they got to be over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could cherry pick the best titles, and then they're so good that they leave you wanting more. So you just kind of keep going more, into like the more kind of weirder offbeat offerings to the more kind of mainstream kind of bland offerings, but they're all kind of there waiting for you.
Yeah, for sure. And with the proliferation of different streaming sites now, people can really at least get a taste for some of these before they have to dig into like Amazon and have to try to find them in the used market. Find some of those in the used market. They can really get a good sense of them early on by using the different streaming sites or seeing what's on YouTube, and so there's so much available for people to kind of just dive in and check somebody out.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we didn't really talk about, one of the facets that Wynorski and Ray and even DeCoteau kind of worked in was the Sci-Fi Channel original, which was again made on a quick budget with kind of silly special effects. And a lot of those are on Tubi, and you can just go down, search for Jim Wynorski, search for Fred Olen Ray, search for David DeCoteau, and like you said, you got 7 or 8 probably quality titles, and probably maybe 15 to 20, but they're there, and they're like you said, you get hooked with a couple of the good ones, and you're left wanting more.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's probably a good way to leave this. I think we're kind of approaching this Santa Summer House from that mindset of like these auteurs who did some really interesting movies are now doing Christmas films, because that's what the market, I guess, is calling for. But it is an interesting thing, if you're hearing us talk about some of these directors and you've never really watched any of their films, it isn't, especially if you're a B-movie fan and you really like films, especially from the 80s and 90s, these guys really did some great stuff. There are really some really fun stuff for sure.
And I mean, that's the key word, fun. I mean, they're clearly having fun, or else they wouldn't be making 100 movies, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 7 movies a year. And I don't think, they take themselves very seriously. I think they take what they do seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously. And they have fun, and they hope that the audience has fun too. And, most of the time we do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's a great place to leave it. I'm just going to, before we wrap up, I'm just going to let everybody know, if you not familiar already, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. That's where we're at. And my novel, Chad and Accounting, is available on Amazon. And again, with Mitch, the video vacuum, it's the videovacuum.blogspot.com, right?
Correct.
I think. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I'm not used to typing it in. I'm used to just clicking on the link that I see on Twitter or wherever. But yeah, that's perfect. And again, Mitch's most recent book, Bloody Book of Horror, can be found on Amazon. Thank you again, Mitch, for coming on. This was another great conversation.
Thank you, man. It was a blast.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void or prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.